Okay, so have you ever been playing a game, right? And you see something really cool like a glowing potion or some kind of crazy magic effect, and you just think to yourself, how did they do that?
It's amazing what they can do with games these
I
days.
know, right?
Yeah.
Well, get this. Today's deep dive is going to be all about how to make those effects. We're talking shaders.
Ooh, shaders.
Yeah? And specifically, how to make them with Unity's ShaderGraph.
Yeah, and shaders are everywhere, by the way. It's not just in games. Think like animated movies, all that kind of stuff. Even those like product demos that you see online, like chances are there's some pretty clever shader work going on behind the scenes.
That's so true. I never even thought about that. But before we get ahead of ourselves, maybe we should, back up a bit. What is a shader?
So a shader, basically, it's like imagine you're trying to create, like a realistic object, like a piece of fruit or something.
Yeah,
If
sure.
you just use a flat color, it's going to look, flat and boring. Shaders, what they do is they take us beyond just those basic colors and they tell the computer how light should be interacting with a surface
Oh.
to make it look more dynamic, more realistic.
So instead of just saying, this apple is red, the shader would be like, this is how light bounces off of this apple.
Exactly. Shaders give us all that power to create subtle variations in color, the shine, the texture, all that. Now, traditionally, creating these shaders involved a lot of complex code, which is where ShaderGraph comes in. It lets us visually build and tweak the shaders using a node system.
Okay, so it's kind of like building with Legos.
There you go.
I like that. So our source for this deep dive is Unity Introduction to ShaderGraph. First things first, it says we have to install ShaderGraph through Unity's package manager. Should we walk through that together?
Absolutely. Always good to have the tools before we start brewing potions. So go ahead and fire up Unity and then head over to the window menu and click on Package Manager.
Okay, I'm in. Now, the source mentions a little pro tip here. Make sure I'm looking in the All tab. Otherwise, ShaderGraph might be hiding.
Good catch.
Yeah.
Yeah, always double check. It's like those cooking shows where they remind you to preheat the oven. It's a small detail, but it makes a big difference.
Speaking of things that can go wrong,
Mhm.
the source mentions some possible version issues.
Yeah, even in the digital world, sometimes we need a helping hand. Don't hesitate to consult the Unity documentation or forums if you run into any issues. It's all part of the learning process.
All right. So with ShaderGraph installed and our troubleshooting hats on, I think it's time to make a shader.
Let's do it.
The first step, according to this, is to create the actual shader.
Right. So we're going to right-click in our project window, go to Create, then Shaders, and we're going to choose PBR
PBR graph, that sounds kind of intimidating. What is PBR?
It stands for Physically Based Rendering.
Okay.
And it might sound complicated, but it's really cool. It's a way to create shaders that are based more in the real world, in reality. So instead of, just faking how the light interacts with the surface, this lets us simulate those interactions more accurately. And that gives us much more realistic results. Think about how light will behave differently on a shiny metal surface compared to a rough piece of wood.
Right.
PBR helps us capture all of those little details.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. So I've got our PBR graph. Let's name it Potion Shader. Now we right-click on that, go to Create again, and this time we choose Material. We'll call this one Potion Mat. Why do we need a shader and a material?
That's a great question. It's a really fundamental concept in computer graphics. Think of it like this. The shader is the blueprint, right? So it defines the rules for how the light interacts with the surface.
Okay.
The material, on the other hand, is where we apply those rules to a specific object.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about, if you're painting something, you could think of the shader as the type of paint. Is it oil or is it acrylic? And then the material is like choosing your paint color.
So it's like the shader is the master plan and the material lets us customize it.
There you go. Perfect. So to see it in action, we're going to need to apply this new material to our potion prefab in the scene. Just drag and drop potion mat right onto the potion.
It's great.
It is.
Maybe not the magical elixir we were hoping for.
Not yet.
But hey, it's ours. And it's a blank canvas. It's going to be good.
It's gonna be. Now, like any good canvas, we got to unleash our creativity, right?
Yep.
So double click on Persian Shader, and that's going to open up our ShaderGraph window. And get this, instead of just lines of code, we have this really cool visual workspace.
Okay, I see it. It's showing me like a preview of my potion bottle, which is still very gray.
Mm.
And then there's all this empty space. It's kind of like a game board almost.
Yeah, that's our node playground. So basically, every action that we want the shader to perform, like adding color or, messing with the lighting, it gets added as a node, and then we can connect them all like a puzzle.
I love puzzles.
It's very satisfying.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what do we do first?
Well, first, over on the left side, you're going to see a panel with a bunch of different settings. That's going to be our control center for, like, the fine-tuning stuff later on. But we're going to start with something called the master node. You see that?
I do. It's like right in the middle, and it's
Yeah.
got all those settings you were talking about.
Yeah. That's the one. The master node is kind of like the conductor of this whole orchestra, right? It controls the final output of your shader. For now, we can kind of leave most of that stuff alone, but later on, you can experiment. You can crank up the metallic slider, play with the smoothness, see what happens.
Ooh, making it super reflective would be cool. Maybe we could make like a magic mirror or something.
Definitely. But for our potion, let's stick to the plan. So if the master node's like the conductor, what are all these other nodes for?
Yeah, I was just wondering that.
Well, think of them like the musicians, right? Each one has a very specific job, and we're going to connect them in a way that tells the computer exactly how we want it to render our potion. And I think the first thing we need is some color, right?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I want this potion to pop. What do we do?
All right, so hit that space bar. That'll bring up our node creation menu. And then search for color. Click and drag that right into the workspace.
Okay, color node acquired. Got it. Now what?
You're going to notice it's got this little pink circle, and it says out 4. That's basically just begging to be connected to something, right?
Oh, I bet it wants to be connected to the master node. It's got that yellow circle that says albedo.
You got it. Click and drag from your pink 04 on the color node right to that yellow circle. Boom, connection made.
Whoa. It changed color in the preview. That was so fast. This is way better than writing out code. Okay, but how do we make it so it's not just like a solid blob of color? How do we actually get the potion to look filled?
Now you're thinking, all right, this is where it gets even cooler. We're going to use a position node. What this does is it basically tells us the exact location, like the X, Y, and Z coordinates, of every point on our potion bottle.
Wait, okay, hold on. Back up. So it's like there's like an invisible grid over our potion, and the position node knows where every single point on that grid is.
Precisely. And once we have all that information, we can manipulate it to make some seriously cool effects.
My mind is blown. Okay, I'm going to add the position node.
Perfect. And then the source mentions using a split node next.
Split. So are we like dividing and conquering this thing?
That's a great way to put it. So the split node takes those X, Y, and Z values from our position node and lets us use them like individually. It gives us even more control.
Fine control. Okay, I've got my nodes connected. What's next?
Now, this is where the magic really starts to happen, okay? We're going to use a node called step. Just imagine we're shining a light, straight through the potion bottle from the top to the bottom. This step node, what it does is it acts like a cutoff point, and it basically determines how much of the potion appears filled with that color that we chose.
So it's like a virtual fill line. Okay, this is so cool. And by changing like the numbers on the step node, I can make it look more or less full.
Mm-hmm.
This is awesome.
It is pretty cool. But we're not quite there yet. We need to use a little bit of a visual trick here. The source says to use an invert colors node for this part.
Invert colors. So we're making like a negative image of our potion now.
That is a great way to think about it, actually. We're basically flipping the effect around so that the filled part shows our potion color. It's a little bit of a workaround, but trust me, it's going to make sense in a second.
Okay, I'm going to trust you on this one. Got my invert colors node. Where to next?
Now we need a replace colors node. This one is going to take the output from our invert colors node, and it's going to use it to decide where to apply that color that we defined earlier. So it's basically telling the shader, okay, any way you see this inverted color, you're going to replace it with our potion color.
Okay, so it's all about like giving the shader really specific instructions, step by step.
Yeah.
Got it. I connected the replace colors node to the albedo and that drum roll.
And we have a filled potion.
Look at that. It's beautiful.
I know. It's very satisfying.
But it's stuck at one fill level.
Hmm.
Is there any way to make that adjustable? Like for when our players drink the potion, or if you wanted to show it changing in a cutscene?
You read my mind. That is where properties come in. So properties are going to give us way more control over our shader without us having to go back and mess with these nodes every single time.
Okay, yeah, properties, they sounded pretty important before. What can we do with them?
So think of them kind of like sliders and dials on a soundboard, okay? They're going to let us adjust the look of the potion just by using the material settings. We can even animate them.
So properties are basically our magic wands for controlling the potion. How do we set one up?
It's actually super easy. Right-click on that color node that we made before
Okay.
and select Convert to Property. And you should see a new little box pop up in that settings panel over on the left side.
I see it.
It's going to be labeled Color.
So can we rename that? Because fill color would make a lot more sense.
Absolutely. Double-click to rename it. Now for the magic. Look at the material settings for your potion, in the Unity editor.
Got it.
You should see a brand new property called, you guessed it, Fill Color. And you can change it however you like.
No way. We gave our potion a little control panel, and now I can change the color without having to, dig through the node graph every time. Amazing. No more messing around just to change a color.
Exactly. And we've got, a whole new level of control now. But we're not done yet. We also want to be able to control the fill amount, right?
Right. Like when our players drink it, we want to see it drain.
For that, we are going to use a slider node. So this one acts like a visual slider, just letting us adjust a value between a minimum and a maximum.
Cool.
So go ahead and create a slider node, set the minimum to -1, and then we're going to connect its output to the input of that step node that we've set up earlier.
Okay, connected it. Now this is what I'm talking about. When I drag the slider on this node, the fill level changes. That is so cool.
And to make it even more powerful, let's turn this slider into a property too. So right-click, convert to property, rename it to fill amount.
You read my mind. Doing it.
And now you can adjust how full your potion is right from those material settings. No node fiddling needed.
This is amazing. We have a customizable dynamic potion. But our source did mention some bonus challenges, and it wouldn't be a real deep dive if we didn't at least, consider them.
Challenge accepted. So the first one asks, what if we wanted the top of the potion to be a different color?
Ooh. Interesting. So, we could have a bubbling effect, or maybe the top could change color to show that it's, poisonous or unstable.
There you go. And this is what's so great about ShaderGraph. We've only just scratched the surface here. There's so much more you can do. The source even mentions using the time node for animation.
Ooh. So you can even make the potion fill and drain automatically on a loop.
Exactly.
That's going straight on the to-do list. What else? What else?
Well, how about we bring back that brown color for the cork?
Oh, right. Yes.
Sounds like we might need those multiply and invert colors nodes again. But that is a challenge for another deep dive.
I love it. We'll leave our listeners with a little homework. But seriously, we've gone from a flat gray potion to a dynamic, customizable, practically magical elixir. And it's all thanks to the power of shaders.
And remember, shaders, they're not just for potions. They're the secret ingredient behind tons of visual effects, from a shimmering dragon in a video game to those really realistic-looking lights that you see in movies.
So what you're saying is, with a little practice, we could all be shader wizards.
Exactly. And with tools like ShaderGraph, the magic is right there at your fingertips. So what will you create?